I'm on a Flutter and Dart team, really a Flutter team. And one of the things we've been doing is writing utility programs and other stuff in Dart. And that just makes it easier. In some cases, we need less tooling. We need, it's easier to do code reviews on the mix part. It's easier to write test cases because they're all in the same language, not opposed to putting Python or Java or Go in our code tree, but we're already doing Dart. So one of the things, though, about Dart is we are all command line, all programs that are run from the command line or run in a test jig or something as we want to pass them. A lot of times we want to pass in configuration, and the simplest way to do that in some ways is command line arguments, right? The main four ways in my mind that we do configuration on programs, we do command line arguments. Text goes on as part of the run command, and it's more than command line arguments, and maybe I should change this. It's actually run command parameters. Environmental variables, so you can set an environment variable and then the program can pick that up from the system environment. You can use property files or other accessible storage. So hey, when a program starts, it always looks for an env file or something like that. And then the other one is property services. Some kind of endpoint or remote place you go and get properties, and the problem with those is to make them secure. A lot of times, if you're going to have secure properties, is you got to find some other method to bootstrap. So in this case, we're not really going to talk about. We're really going to just talk about adding command line arguments. The other one in a Dart program that would be pretty easy is environment variables. I don't like those because it's a little opaque, but so in this case, this is an example of what a command line argument might look like. We had this example.dart that I got in the shelf project from the Dart team, and in this case, I added command line arguments to it. And what I wanted to be able to do is create a proxy server, and that proxy server would listen on localhost at port 8080, and it would forward all requests to pub.dev. So the reason I did command line arguments for this, right, is we want the ability to change which interface we listen on, the port we listen on, and what we're forwarding to without hard coding changes in the program. So, what is that going to look like? The other, just real quick, the other type of parameter that you can have, the ones I showed above had values, so it was like port 8080. In this case, you can also have flags. They're just another version of parameter where we know that we don't have an actual value that follows. So the other ones are label value. These are just the name. So it's like dash dash verbose. You could do dash dash verbose and then a level, but typically dash dash verbose means turn it on. Here I have ignore certs and no cores would be flag options. I'm not actually going to show any code examples in Dart for that. Maybe I'll do that another time if people are interested. I really like the Dart args project. So in this case, what I showed before was we actually have a proxy server, and we're going to pass in the address we're going to listen on the inbound side, the port we're going to listen on, and what our target address is. So that makes this super flexible, right? We can run this proxy server and forward to any one host, and we can have it listen on different interfaces. So I could have a different proxy listening on one interface and one on another. That's kind of useful in places where you have multiple Ethernet adapters in the hardware or whatever. So what does the code for this look like? One of the things we would like is to have polish, and the args thing does that. So in this case, I actually ran the same example with a flag option, dash dash help, but I hadn't actually implemented help in this. There's a way to do it with command structure, and they also support subcommands like, how you can do flutter pub get, and then you can pass it command line options, and really the get is an option on the pub subcommand. So I didn't implement any of that. In this case, I just gave it an option it didn't know. And the really cool thing about the Dart args is it would show me all of the command line options parameters that I actually had registered for. So I had these three: port, address, and target address, and it shows what the default values are. So if you don't know what's happening, you can just give a Dart program, dash dash help or something else. I could implement help that would be smarter about this and not print out, could not find an option named help, but in the example program, I didn't want to put in that work and add the complexity to the example. So let's look at it. So this is actually in a PR I have open. For the shelf project to add more command line parameters. I don't know that they'll pick it up, so you may not see that. So the main thing here is when you run a program on the command line, you actually have a list of strings that get passed into the environment, and so you add this list of strings on the main as the arguments, and then we get a parser. I'll show you what my parser looks like below. we have a configured parser, so I know I'm going to look for the address, the port, and the target address for this proxy server, and those are going to get passed in as arguments, and you can see those right here, right? We get the parse, we parse the arguments that were passed in on the command line, and that creates an array of values for those. And it turns out, oh, this one, they're all strings. There's one of the examples in the shelf project, or maybe there, we did it as a Boolean, right? Or the port could have been an int. Actually, in this case, it's an int. We convert it to an int. We assume it's passed in as a string, but we could have actually done that a little differently. Could I have done that differently? You know what, I'll look at that. So in this case, they're strings, and I just do an int parse on the port number because the API requires that, and we write a message if any of those don't parse, or if any of them are something else. If it's not convertible to a string, if somebody tried to put it in an array or something. So in this case, we ended up with an address, a port, and a target. And the thing I really want to point out here is we gave them a default, right? So up at the top, we did a get parser. And so we add the option port, we add the option address, we add the option target, and we set their default values. And that's why when we looked up here and we saw this, right, it showed us the defaults, because when we configured the parser, we set the defaults. So we can still have a quasi hard-coded default if nothing's passed in, but this lets us override that. So we just parse the values out of that, convert one to int, use the others as string, and it turns out this shelf.served needed a target address, an address that we're going to listen on and a listen port, and boom, we're done. That's all there is to it. The key part here was configuring a parser with the parameters you want. You can also put help if we implemented help, right? Actually, you saw that when I did --x or something. This help is what actually showed up in the output. And then that's really all there is to it. Configure a parser, map the values from the parser into your values, and then use them. Have a great day.